In our headlines on this Wednesday, July 30th, here in South Korea. The administration's top economic delegation is in Washington, D.C. for talks over U.S. tariffs as South Korea seeks lower import duties for its exports into the American market. And presiding over yet another emergency economic meeting, President Jae Myung shares a blueprint for growth based on promoting investments in strategic areas like AI and easing excessive penalties on corporate activities. Meanwhile, the International Monetary Fund lowers its growth outlook for the South Korean economy this year to 0.8% amid uncertainty within the global trade environment. We start over in Washington, D.C., where Economy and Finance Minister Koo Yun-cheol headed a meeting with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Our Pyongyang starts us off.
Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Economy and Finance Koo Yun-cheol, Industry Minister Kim Jong-kwan, and Trade Minister Yeo Han-gu held talks in Washington, D.C. with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick on Tuesday, local time. The talks lasted about 2 hours. Koo is in Washington aiming to finalize a tariff deal before the U.S. reciprocal tariffs on South Korea come into effect on August 1st. He immediately began talks with Secretary Lutnick, despite only his meeting with Treasury Secretary Besant on July 31st having been publicly disclosed. Upon landing, Koo has told reporters that Korea will explain its economic cooperation proposals clearly, especially in areas like shipbuilding.
We'll explain economic cooperation projects between Korea and the U.S., including shipbuilding, which the U.S. is interested in. We'll make the case that forming an alliance with Korea brings major benefits to the U.S. as well. I believe their understanding of this has improved a lot.
According to the Wall Street Journal, the U.S. side had urged South Korea to bring its best and final trade offer to the table during a recent meeting with Korea's industry and trade ministers in Scotland. Lutnick reportedly told Korean officials that they need to bring it all when meeting President Trump, who still wants to be convinced why a new deal with Korea is necessary, given that the U.S. has already struck trade agreements with the EU, Japan, and the UK. With just 2 days left before the tariff decision, Foreign Minister Cho Hyun is also set to arrive in the U.S., bringing the scope of the Korea-U.S. talks into the diplomatic sphere. Cho is scheduled to meet with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio the day after his arrival. Samsung Electronics Chairman Lee Jae-yong has also arrived in Washington and is expected to support the Korea-U.S. tariff negotiations from the sidelines. Pyongyang, Arirang News.
And trade talks between the U.S. and China over in Sweden came to a close this past Tuesday, with prospects of an extension in their truce on tariffs. Our Lee Seung-jae has details.
Tensions in the global trade may be easing slightly as trade officials from the U.S. and China on Tuesday wrapped up 2 days of what they called constructive talks in Stockholm, aimed at avoiding the return of steep tariffs that could rattle the world economy. Both sides agreed to pursue a 90-day extension of their current tariff truce, which is set to expire on August 12th. No major breakthroughs were announced after the talks, but according to reports, the tone from both sides were notably more positive. While U.S. officials say it's up to President Donald Trump to decide whether to extend a trade truce, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent shot down any prospects of the U.S. president rejecting an extension. Speaking from Air Force One on Tuesday, Trump said he'll soon be briefed on the 2-day talks, but added that Bessent felt very good about the meeting. Trump also confirmed plans for a possible summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping before the end of the year, adding that the Chinese leader wants to meet. Meanwhile, the U.S. is continuing trade talks with the European Union. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said talks are still ongoing around trade and aluminum duties, as well as digital services, but a major sticking point is the pharmaceuticals. European officials are aiming to lock in a 15% cap on drug tariffs before Trump announces his own pharmaceutical policy, expected within 2 weeks. With the August 1st deadline fast approaching, the final decision rests with Trump as the U.S. and the European bloc look to avoid a major trade conflict. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
In his first overseas trip as Foreign Minister, Koo Yun-cheol paid a courtesy call on Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, reaffirming Seoul's commitment to expanding bilateral interactions. The Japanese Prime Minister welcomed Cho's call, urging for continued progress in bilateral ties and trilateral partnership with the U.S. Addressing members of the media, Cho, for his part, shared intentions to discuss the three-way cooperation upon his arrival in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday local time to meet with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He also spoke of proposing partnership in AI as the third pillar of the Korea-U.S. collaboration, alongside their security alliance and free trade agreement. Tesla CEO Elon Musk says he had a video call with Samsung Electronics chairman Lee Jae-yong as well as senior leadership, confirming a recent announcement of collaboration. Taking to X, that is, this past Tuesday, Musk claimed the two companies are combining their respective strengths to deliver the best possible result. It was announced earlier this week that Samsung Electronics secured a $16.4 billion order from Tesla for AI chips. President Lee Jae-myung has pledged to set up a strategic fund to support investments in areas such as AI and renewable energy. Our Yoon Jung-min reports from the presidential office.
The emergency meeting on economic affairs will shift to one seeking growth engines in the long term as the fully fledged new government takes shape. That was according to President Lee Jae-myung on Wednesday, as he presided over the third emergency economic meeting at his office, hinting at where the economy is headed for the next 5 years.
우리 국민 주권 정부는 실용적인 시장주의 정부가 될 것입니다. 성장의 기회와 동력을 만들기 위해서 기업을 또 기업 활동을 지원하고 격려하는 그런 정부가 될 것이라고.
He promised to create a fund of over 100 trillion won, worth some $72 billion, which the people and corporations take part in to make investments in areas deemed strategically important, such as AI and renewable energy. The liberal-leaning leader also vowed to cut red tape to encourage businesses in Korea and launch another task force to revamp penalties too heavy on firms.
과도한 경제 형벌로 기업의 경영 활동이 위축되지 않도록 정부 내 경제 형벌 합리화 TF도 곧바로 가동하도록 하겠습니다. 이번 정기 국회에서부터 본격적인 정비를 해서 1년 내 30% 정비 같은 명확한 목표를.
He was pointing to a case where breach of trust is abused to place penalties too heavy on corporations, raising questions about whether it fits into a global standard. Another pillar for growth was on achieving balanced regional growth for a country where too much concentration on its capital area has often been cited as a factor that threatens the sustainability of the nation. He vowed to draw up rules and policies to make sure resources are used in an efficient way, noting as an example his consumption voucher policy that favors people living in rural areas over those in the capital. Also hinted at was aggressive belt-tightening in fiscal policy so that more funds can be used for key policies.
With regard to next year's budget, President Lee ordered a bold restructuring of budgets that yield very little or are used routinely.
Details of the new government's growth strategy will be unveiled in August, based on what was discussed on Wednesday, apparently taking into account not so favorable conditions, such as low growth and higher prices. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Right, the International Monetary Fund has lowered yet again its growth projection for South Korea this year to 0.8%. Our economic correspondent Kim Do-yeon covers this latest outlook.
The International Monetary Fund has once again cut its growth forecast for South Korea, this time to 0.8% for 2025. In its latest World Economic Outlook update released Tuesday, the IMF lowered Korea's growth projection by 0.2 percentage points from April, which was already half of January's 2.0% forecast. Lower projections have also been released recently by other institutions. The Korea Development Institute and BOK both fixed their 2025 growth outlook to 0.8% as well, with the OECD having the most positive outlook at 1.0%. While no direct commentary for South Korea was provided, South Korea is heavily reliant on trade with the U.S. and tariffs had an impact on these numbers, according to the IMF.
A breakdown in trade talks or renewed protectionism could dampen growth globally and fuel inflation in some countries.
As for South Korea's 2026 outlook, the IMF's projection improved for South Korea to 1.8% from 1.4% in April. The IMF releases economic outlooks for all member countries every April and October and publishes revised forecasts for the 30 major economies in January and July. For the world's economic outlook, the IMF revised its projection to 3.0% from 2.8%, still lower than its forecast earlier this year, but showing improvement.
Global growth has been revised up to 3% in 2025 and 3.1% in 2026, reflecting stronger than expected front-loading, lower tariff rates compared to early April, easier financial conditions, including a weaker US dollar, and fiscal expansion in some jurisdictions.
As for other nations, the U.S. growth forecast was raised by 0.1 percentage point to 1.9%, while China's was significantly revised up by 0.8 percentage points to 4.8%. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
An 8.8 magnitude earthquake struck Russia's Far East early Wednesday, triggering tsunami warnings and evacuation orders across Pacific nations, including Japan. Centered on the Kamchatka Peninsula, the earthquake ranks as the sixth strongest ever recorded and generated tsunami waves of up to 4 meters high. A state of emergency was declared after tsunami waves struck the region, prompting the evacuation of nearly 300 residents. No casualties have been reported thus far. The U.S. tsunami warning system issued alerts for hazardous tsunami waves across parts of the Pacific, including Hawaii. Authorities in South Korea say no significant impact is expected here. The Trump administration remains open to dialogue with, quote, everyone for peace and prosperity. This is according to U.S. State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce in response to questions by reporters on Tuesday regarding recent remarks by North Korea's Kim Yo-jong. The sister of the regime's leader, Kim Jong-un, suggested that talks between her brother and his U.S. counterpart, Donald Trump, may take place if Washington discards its demand for denuclearization. Up next, we take you for a walk down memory lane as one Korean War veteran recounts his experience of the past conflict here and his impression of South Korea today. Our Kim Jong-shil had the pleasure of meeting up with him.
More than 70 years ago, he served abroad, a U.S. Navy minesweeper during the Korean War. This week, he returned to the country he once helped protect. Dr. Malcolm Lean Williamson is one of 6 UN veterans invited to Korea as part of a government-led program marking UN Forces Participation Day on July 27th.
Dr. Williamson, welcome back to Korea. Thank you so much for being here. What do you think when you think of the word Korea?
Well, I served in the Korean War in 1951 through 53 on a minesweeper and had some close calls. But I appreciate the fact that we have a chance to come and revisit Korea through the program.
One of those close calls came during a mission near Incheon, where his ship took a direct hit.
The water just churned and smoke drifted by, the ship shuddered, and I knew we'd been hit. And if I had run down the starboard side, I would have been right where a shell hit.
He never forgot that moment, and returning decades later, he found a country transformed.
I've been very impressed with the advancements that have been made in your country, because I know it was devastated during the war. But you know, the thing that I'm impressed most by is the people.
By his side this week is someone who didn't live through the war, but now calls Korea home. Emily, his granddaughter, has spent the past 5 years teaching kindergarten in Seoul.
I've lived here for 5 years, and I've always been very proud of my grandfather and the sacrifices he made.
For Emily, it wasn't just stories this time. It was seeing that gratitude in person.
I'm really touched, and it's been a very special experience seeing my grandparents here in Korea and having them be taken care of by so many loving people.
After the war, Dr. Williamson earned a PhD in statistics from USC and spent decades consulting on medical research. Now at 94, he leaves Korea with one final message.
I hope that people will recognize that their inalienable rights come from God.
A sailor, a grandfather, a man of science and of faith. Honored by the nation he once helped protect. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
Every year, leaders of APEC member states dress up in the host country's traditional attire for a family picture. And as Korea's ancient city of Gyeongju looks to host this year's economic gathering, Korea's hanbok is receiving the limelight yet again. My colleague An Sung-jin reports.
Colorful hand-dyed fabrics and threads of silk. For artisan Park Sun-na, this is all a work of precision and pride. Every cut of the scissors and stitch sewn into silk reflect years of mastery in hanbok, Korea's traditional attire, but Park devotes her expertise beyond that, focusing on hanbok from the Shilla period.
In Shinla, even the silk was different. The clothes or hanbok was made from the finest materials, and gold was abundant, often used for decorations. It truly was the kingdom of silk and splendor.
The attire of the Shilla kingdom is characterized with its wide sleeves and delicate details around the sleeves and collar. Hanbok styles differed by class, yet all of them had slimmer silhouettes compared to the wider hanbok of latter periods. And this sophisticated look is especially tied to Gyeongju, the ancient capital of the Shilla kingdom. But what sets Park's work apart is not only her tailoring, it's the traditional dyeing techniques. The process is meticulous. Hand-picked flowers are dried and infused alongside berries to create the red palette. Then pieces of white silk are soaked, dried, and soaked again, often more than 50 times. With each soaking, the fabric absorbs more color, giving it earthy yet vibrant hues. As Gyeongju prepares to host APEC 2025 Korea, Gyeongsangbuk-do Province and Gyeongju are planning to showcase key elements of Korean traditional culture, and hanbok is taking center stage. During the international event, world leaders will be given the traditional attire, bringing Korea's elegance to the global stage. But it's more than recognition for Park. The honor for her lies in hanbok leaping forward onto the world stage. In every dip of dye and every stitch of silk, Park works on continuing the legacy. An Sung-jin, Arirang News, Gyeongju.
Meanwhile, a theme park in the Greater Seoul area has been transformed into a haunted village to offer visitors a refreshing break from the sweltering heat. Our Park Gonu was there.
A quiet, peaceful village by day. But as darkness falls, a chill creeps in and eerie whispers echo through the air. Under the crescent moon, ghosts began to appear. Summer may be the hottest season, but for many in Korea, it's also the coolest in a spooky kind of way. One popular destination is the Horror Village in the Dead of Night Festival, running until the end of August at the Korean Folk Village in Yongin in Gyeonggi-do Province. Korean ghosts are souls with unresolved sorrow, or han. They don't just scare you, but they carry a story, one they never got to finish. So what kind of sorrow are you holding on to?
결혼을 못한 채로 죽었어.
From virgin ghosts to a local version of the Grim Reaper, these traditional Korean spirits send chills down visitors' spines, especially when they appear out of nowhere.
It's been scorching hot lately, so I thought this horror experience might blow away the heat. I kept sweating and shivering.
It's way different to watching movies.
From haunted escape rooms to scream-filled walkthroughs, flashing red lights and scary sounds greet those who dare to enter.
나가! 이리 들어오는 거 아니야? 저쪽이야! 잘못 들어왔어!
Even the food gets creepy, including the bloody finger latte, topped with a broken finger-shaped cookie. Some restaurants are splattered with blood, with things appearing above visitors' heads.
I thought it was a regular restaurant until I saw ghosts hanging above. I almost fell over in shock, but it's unique and fun. I was too scared to even feel the heat.
The restrooms are also haunted, dimly lit up with red lights, with ghosts waiting for you, some appearing in the mirror. At the end of the night, visitors who turned into ghosts with costumes and painted faces competed with each other to see who was the scariest. It seems like a peaceful, happy ending. But beware, these ghosts will return with the next dark night until August 24th. So, for those looking for an experience of Korea's haunted summer nights, good luck. 박건우, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. Starting in the UK, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has announced that the UK will recognize the state of Palestine at the UN General Assembly in September, unless Israel meets key conditions, including agreeing to a ceasefire in Gaza. On Tuesday, following an emergency cabinet meeting, Starmer outlined the UK's conditional recognition of Palestine's statehood. He said recognition will be formalized in September unless Israel agrees to an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, pledges no annexation of the West Bank, allows full humanitarian access, and recommits to a viable two-state solution. Starmer reiterated that there is no equivalence between Israel and Hamas and reaffirmed demands on Hamas to release all hostages and disarm. However, Israel's government strongly rejected the announcement, calling it a reward for Hamas. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump, after meeting with Starmer in Scotland, stated that the recognition was not discussed during their talks. The UK's warning follows reports of a severe famine in Gaza and plans to airdrop aid into the enclave. In the United States, after 4 people died in a deadly shooting in Midtown Manhattan on Monday, investigators have been sent to Las Vegas, where the gunman who also shot himself lived, to learn more about the possible motive. Investigators who recovered a handwritten note say there were no links to terrorism or criminal organizations found. The note found on the body of 27-year-old Shane Devin Tamura said, "Study my brain, I'm sorry." It also claimed he suffered from CTE, a brain disease triggered by head injuries, and blamed the NFL for his condition despite having never played football professionally. Tamura, who had driven from Las Vegas, entered the lobby of a building housing the National Football League headquarters and major financial firms at around 6:30 p.m. on Monday with an assault-style rifle. The victims included an off-duty New York City police officer who was described as a New York hero. The incident marks the city's deadliest mass shooting in over 2 decades. Pope Leo XIV met over 1,000 Catholic influencers and digital missionaries from more than 140 countries at a Jubilee Mass in St. Peter's Basilica on Tuesday. The Pope addressed the young people in Spanish, English, and Italian, reiterating his call for an end to violence and the need to proclaim peace. He emphasized that digital missionaries are more essential than ever in spreading the message of peace. He also cautioned that while technology has become increasingly influential, Creativity should not be used to undermine human dignity. At the 2025 India Couture Week in Delhi, Rohit Bal's design house unveiled the Cash Gold collection on Tuesday, marking a tribute to the late designer nearly 9 months after his death. The collection is rooted in Rohit Bal's lifelong bond with Kashmir, drawing on symbols of flowers and his signature motifs of lotus and peacocks. Bollywood actor Arjun Rampal closed the show wearing a black velvet sherwani detailed in silver embroidery. He paused midway on the ramp to honor his friend, saying legends never die. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
From July 1st to July 29th, there were 21 tropical nights in Seoul, the same number as in 1994, which was the highest ever. If Seoul has another tropical night tonight, it will break the tie with 1994 and hold the all-time record alone. It seems like the steaming heat will not cool down even during the night. Today, a strong heat wave warning has been raising everywhere, with the heat wave advisories on the east coast of Gyeongsang-do provinces being upgraded to a warning. The scorching heat will continue again throughout the country tomorrow. It will start warm tomorrow morning again, with Seoul at 28 degrees Celsius and Chuncheon at 25 degrees. Highs will stay hot at around 35 to 36 degrees in most parts of the country. It is predicted that the heat of around 35 degrees will continue until early next week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up next is our daily panel session.